Welcome back to the Piano Pod, everyone. I am so glad you're here because today's episode is truly special. My guest is Charu Suri, a trailblazing jazz pianist and composer whose music defies conventional boundaries. Charu has crafted a sound entirely her own, weaving together the intricate beauty of Indian ragas, the improvisational soul of jazz, and the spiritual depth of Sufi music. The result is a sonic landscape that feels timeless and entirely new. Charu's journey is just as compelling as her music. Born in India and raised across 4 continents, her global experiences have shaped a musical voice that is rich, rooted, and refreshingly original. She is one of the very few female jazz composers of Indian origin to have graced the stages of Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and Berlin Jazz Club. Her critically acclaimed albums, The Book of Ragas, Ragas and Waltzes, and her most recent work, Rags and Ragas, have redefined what it means to blend jazz with Indian classical traditions. With renowned collaborators, Charu continues to push boundaries of genre and storytelling through music. In our conversation, we explore how she developed her signature fusion of jazz, ragas, and Sufi influences, the creative journey behind her genre-defying albums, and the challenges and breakthroughs in blending musical traditions from different cultures, and what it means to be a South Asian woman forging her path in a jazz world. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment to share something important with you. Creating this podcast, curating meaningful conversations, and producing high-quality content and growing our reach takes an incredible amount of time and resources. If you have been enjoying these episodes and believe in the mission of the Piano Pod, I invite you to support this work by becoming a paid subscriber on Substack at thepianopod.substack.com. Your support helps sustain and grow this platform, making it possible for us to continue highlighting diverse voices, exploring creative journeys, and expanding the conversation around classical and genre-crossing music. Even a small contribution goes a long way. Now, let's get into it. Here is my conversation with the brilliant Charu Suri. Please enjoy the show. You are listening to the Piano Pod, where we talk to the brightest minds in the industry about how they are bringing the piano into the future and thriving in a complex, ever-evolving world. Welcome to the Piano Pod, Charu. It is so wonderful to have you here.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. And then I assume you're in New York.
New Jersey, actually, very close. Yeah.
Okay.
In
Wonderful.
Verona, close to Montclair.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Beautiful area. I live in Brooklyn, so we're not too far, right?
Not too far. Not too far. Yeah.
Wonderful. So your music is truly one of a kind. I've never heard anything like it until I was introduced. And so really seamlessly blending jazz and Indian ragas and then even Sufi influences into a sound that really feels both innovative and deeply rooted in multiple traditions. I can't wait to really dive into your journey, creative process, and the vision behind your music. But here is my first question. If you were to capture the essence of your artistry, mission, and passion in just a few sentences, how would you define who you are as an artist today?
I am an artist who seeks to create music that transcends genres and boundaries and borders, to deliver music that reflects my heritage, but also that heals and pleases the listener.
Beautiful. I love the part where you said healing. We all need some healing.
And that's why I started doing what I did, because I had to heal myself And in the process, I ended up healing a lot of people who ended up listening to my creations, and I'm very grateful. We all need healing.
Oh, yeah. But to get there, that must be a journey.
Very much.
Hmm. Spiritual journey, maybe?
Yes, very
Yeah.
spiritual. I'm very much guided by the higher powers and the universe. And I've always been an advocate of taking risks and listening to that higher purpose, because most of us go through life just trying to fit neatly into the boxes. I did as a concert pianist. We can talk about that. But yes, it definitely was a spiritual journey.
So I can't really wait to dig into even deeper. But now, first of all, I'd love to explore this innovative genre of raga jazz that you've pioneered. But first, could you briefly explain to our audience what a raga is, just to differentiate between? Obviously, there's a huge difference, but maybe you may find some similarity in between those two. Completely seems like a complete different genres.
Absolutely. So I'm going to illustrate that on the piano. So obviously, when we go through music in the Western tradition, we play a scale. And almost every single student of music has been introduced to music this way, to learn the 12-tone scales and the relative minor, and then go on to the next major scale, etc. So we have 12 major and 12 minor scales that we know in the Western tradition. That's how I learned music. But I also concurrently learned Indian ragas. And a raga could be or now that is a scale, but it's a very different type of scale. It's a raga. It actually can't even be called a scale, because a raga means modal scale. So when I perform, I try to explain and also educate my audience that the Western way of doing music is what we normally think of music. Normally, from the church hymns to the piano repertoire to the orchestral repertoire, all is a universe that stems from the 12 major and the 12 minor scales. That's just how we know it, and that's how people have heard of music. There are over 500 ragas. It's the universe is actually staggering how big that universe is, and most people don't know any.
Mhm. Yeah.
At all. It's a niche that really hasn't entered mainstream music. It has in certain pieces that have become popular, but people don't even know that's a raga. They don't know what that is. So a raga is a modal scale, like what I played, where the ascending and the descending don't necessarily have to be the same. That itself is one step that's different way of thinking than the Western scale, because we were all used to playing 12, notes up and 8 notes up and 8 notes down, and using the exact same notes ascending and descending. A raga does not have to be that way. But what also makes a raga very special and also deep, that's why it takes years of study, is that it is played in a certain time of day, which is a very spiritual way of looking at music. So normally when you think of pieces like this, now the Moonlight Sonata wasn't even named by Beethoven, but immediately when we hear it, we are thinking of a certain time of day. We're thinking of the moonlight. But pieces like that, and also like Chopin's nocturnes, are few and far between in Western music, because they evoke a certain aura, a certain time of day, a certain vision that comes. Whereas in a raga, that was always the thinking. That when you play a scale like Kalyani, which is the Lydian scale, that is supposed to be played right after sunset. Each raga comes with that thinking as part and parcel of the aura of the raga. which shows you how intensely spiritual and meditative that whole thinking and mindset is, right? So I compose pieces in Kalyani, which is akin to the Lydian scale, and one of my pieces sounds like this. So I really try to use the notes of the raga. And immediately when you hear that, you do feel like it's after sunset. The energies are very different. And I've composed pieces in the morning raga, Sankarabharanam, which is the same as the Ionian scale, which is the perfect major scale. So there is some overlap. But a raga is a very ancient scale. It's over 2,000 years old. And it has not been really discovered or put into mainstream music as much. It's so beautiful, by the way. I have so many ragas. I myself am learning this process, and each raga can really anchor you into that hyper meditative state. So I always joke yoga originated in India and raga originated in India. The purpose of both of them are very similar.
Yeah, yeah. And used to be a little bit of a yoga junkie, and
Yeah.
so I would attend a class and where the teacher would play actually with the instrument of raga, and it was just amazing how the music of raga is so connected to humankind, human being, of spirituality we hardly talk about in unfortunately in any other genres of music, right?
We don't. And it's so healing. And that's the reason I started doing it, because I'm a very sensitive soul, as I think a lot of artists are. I am shy of anything that's brutal or negative. We want to be loved and feel warm and fuzzy. Artists are that way. And I started to go to the ragas to find my healing place. And in that process, I created my own works because that's the way I wanted to be healed. It's just amazing how the journey happened. I was not planning on any of this, really. I started playing with the ragas in jazz and in classical jazz style that I do. And people heard this and they're like, what is that you're playing? It's so beautiful. Can you play more of it? And I'm like, what do you mean? This is how I hear music, I did not know that I was hearing something new in my head, because this is how I heard about music. And then I started, composing and putting pen to paper and then recording. And they're like, people who listen to it, this is amazing. Play more of that. So that's how this whole raga thing was born in my music.
So that's where the Raga Jazz
Yes,
come from.
that's how it ended up being Raga Jazz. That was the journey to get to that, because I was schooled when I was very young as a child as a concert pianist in Mozart, Brahms, Beethoven, Bach, you name it. But I was also schooled in Carnatic and Hindustani ragas. So I would sing that with my teacher. So concurrently, when I was growing up as a child in India, and I started playing the piano when I was 5 years old, and I started learning the ragas when I was 8 years old. So concurrently, I was doing both of these things simultaneously, and that's how I've always thought about music, I guess.
Wow, interesting. So, well, then let's talk about your, where you grew up, and then obviously you mentioned you were born raised in India, and then but where did the jazz influence come from?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Jazz is actually relatively recent for me. It's only 5 years ago that I went to New Orleans and I fell in love with jazz, with Preservation Hall, and that's when I started writing jazz and my jazz albums. So it's so recent. People listen to it, they're like, we can't believe it. We think you've been doing this all your life. No, I was really a classical trained musician and a concert classical pianist. So my earliest memories of performing were performing everything from Chopin's waltzes to the nocturnes to Beethoven sonatas and Mozart sonatas, like every other pianist pretty much does. And then I went to New Orleans, and that was the city that changed my life. I still now talk, and the New Orleans musicians are playing my Raga Jazz, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's incredible what's happening here, and they want to learn more about Raga Jazz. But what I loved about jazz was obviously it had an improvisational element to it while being structured. And that is also reflected in the way Indian music is done with the ragas. You start with the raga with an alap. Like an alap is an introduction of a raga. I'm playing a raga that's a late morning raga, that's Charukesi raga, my namesake raga. So it might go like this. That's a late morning raga, and that's an unfolding of a raga. You know, when it comes to Indian music, you start with like an unfolding of the raga, then you go into the song, something like this. And then the actual melody would come. Now, the interesting thing about Indian music is there's an element of improvisation in it. They'll go and then they'll start doing really fast, vocals and everything. So what attracted me to jazz, to get back to your question, was the improvisational nature of jazz and the improvisational nature of ragas they had amazing parallels and overlap. The only difference being jazz had harmony and Indian music doesn't. So jazz would be something. So once you start putting the harmonies into it, you've created something totally different called Raga Jazz. That's how it all happened.
Really? Wow. New Orleans is an amazing place. I know that.
It is. It really is.
Yes. I've been there a few times. I used to live in Florida, so it was a very quick drive there, and it's a special place. And so when you just really see the jazz music in New Orleans, and maybe you saw several jazz musicians, and did you hear the raga is also coming together like in your ear?
What I heard in New Orleans was the fact that some of the melodies were super simple with an amazing rhythmic structure, like this. And it's tried piano. You have that amazing that those are the qualities, those are the music I heard from New Orleans, with the rhythm and with the stride piano, with the chordings, and then the simple lyrical melody. It isn't that complex. It's not like runs all over the place, it's that's Hello Dolly by and that's one of the favorite jazz standards. I loved that simplicity, that amazing song-like melody, that lyrical melody that you can hear, that you can hum and take away at home, and that amazing rhythmic structure. So that inspired me to take those elements of the rhythm and the harmony and weave it into jazz. So, for example, one of my most well-known pieces is based on Raga Hemant. I took that style of New Orleans to heart, and I came up with this. own piece based on Raga Hemant, using some of that simplistic rhythmic and harmonic style found in New Orleans. Can you hear the parallel?
Yes, I do. What
Yeah.
a special blend. So the right hand is really following the Indian tradition.
Yeah. The raga, the notes, but using melody, but the left hand is trying to do more of the stride and the harmony, simple harmonies, nothing too crazy. I might get more jazzy later on as I take risks with the jazz chords. But yeah, that was where I started my raga jazz journey.
Oh my goodness. But just to start a jazz music is, as a classically trained, it's not easy.
So hard. Tell me about it. Oh my God. And most people listen to my work saying, oh, you've been doing it ever since I was a child. I'm like, no.
That's what I thought.
I fell flat on my face too many times. I can't even.
Really?
Oh, God. Are you kidding me? I bombed so many times and I bombed concerts, and people are like, sweetheart, I don't know about this. And then I kept learning and I kept studying, and I still now have a jazz teacher. I have a raga teacher because I really wanted to get to know these genres very well. I put in more effort than most people have any idea, like constantly refining, constantly blending, constantly chipping away to make it sound like it's like really super seamless, which I think right now that's what it sounds like, and I'm grateful.
Yes. I'm surprised to hear that because, honestly, 5 years ago is around pandemic, no?
Yes, exactly. Around the pandemic. And I started doing more live streams then. I started putting more videos out. People started listening and they were like, wow, we had no idea you could do this. And then I started giving more jazz gigs and jazz concerts. And then it sort of like blew up. And then we played at Carnegie Hall, debuted the Book of Ragas. And then jazz critics started writing about it. They're like, oh my God, the jazz raga. And then last year I went to London, and Marilyn Gordon is Dexter Gordon's, wife, and she gave me her book on Dexter Gordon, and she said, you know what, you own your genre, you own it. Nobody is doing what you're doing, and that was for me the ultimate compliment. It's just amazing to hear someone from the jazz circle talk about my music that way. I was like actually really floored. I was like blown away. And now more people are just emailing me saying, oh my God, tell me more about Raga Jazz. What are you doing? Tell me more. Like, what is that? So I'm hoping to write a manual and a style sheet and a guidebook eventually. Because, don't you think these ragas are beautiful? Aren't they great?
Beautiful. And then you hear these raga melodies in like movies,
Yeah,
and they also blend, sometimes like a pop style music into the melody of raga, but jazz and raga I've never heard of.
exactly.
But I love listening to them. They are really spiritually fulfilling, listening to raga music. So
Yes.
that's amazing.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, but when you first started blending these genres, like 4 years ago, whatever, and what was the experience like as a classical pianist to begin with, and with an Indian heritage, and did this fusion feel like a natural? Well, you mentioned that. Did it really feel like, wow, this makes sense to me?
No, this is the way I heard music. It was very, very odd. This is the way I started playing and improvising, and I didn't really edit anything in my head, to be very honest. A lot of these pieces just came out completely in its entirety like this. Yeah, I know. I never made drafts. I didn't make any drafts. They just came, like the Charukesi raga that I showed ended up being French Quarter on my last album, and so trying to keep true to the notes, the piece ended up being. etc. Let's go back. Yeah, so I'm really trying to take it now. That scale, the Charukesi scale, does not exist in Western music at all. It's not even in the modes. It's not a Mixolydian, Ionian, nothing. That's a Charukesi raga. It's half major, half minor. And I've been trying to find any parallel that exists and really doesn't exist. It's an Indian scale, and those are the notes. And I've tried to take the notes using and I created a melody and harmonies out of it. And I think everyone loves that. Everyone loves that thing, and it just sort of just came out in its entirety. I can't even explain it.
Oh wow. Wow, it's so beautiful. So for those who are listening, I really would like for you to explore Charu's albums available on streaming services. So let's talk about your albums, right? So that Book of Ragas, it comes in 2 volumes, and I
Yes,
thoroughly enjoyed. And
yes.
it's like a foundation of this new genre you created,
Yes,
Raga Jazz.
I think that is exactly what it is. It's a foundation. It's the first time I think Raga Jazz has sort of entered the jazz mainstream in this way. And so Book of Ragas, which we debuted at Carnegie Hall in 2019, and Book of Ragas Volume 2. Book of Ragas is almost all evening ragas. Raga Kalyani, Raga Hemant, Raga Bhairavi, which is not really an evening raga, it's a morning raga, but a lot of musicians in India end the concert using Raga Bhairavi because it's the Phrygian scale. And many Indian musicians end the concert using Raga Bhairavi, so I ended up throwing that in there. Book of Ragas Volume 1. Book of Ragas Volume 2 is all morning ragas.
I see. Okay.
Jaunpuri, Asavari, Sankarabharnam, which is the same thing as the major scale. And Sankarabharnam is the only piece I've written using piano and vibraphone, and it's the 3rd track. And people listen to it, they're like, this sounds like the sunrise. And I'm like, that's funny because that raga is supposed to be played exactly at sunrise. It sounds like the sun is rising, and when you hear it. Yeah, so that it just gives a feeling of the sun coming out in the morning, and the raga that's used is supposed to be exactly at that time of day. And it's so amazing. I lived with the raga for a while, and this is also a way of healing, of slowing down, right, of really being in that moment. And when we say in that moment, in that hyper moment, that time of day. And I wrote the Book of Ragas Volume 2 during the pandemic, and I would get up really early in the morning and compose, and that's how I think I ended up using all morning ragas. But the mindset of the West is just to rush and rush and rush and rush from place to place and be with this meeting and that meeting and that. And at the end of the day, you don't even know what you did that day. I have to be very honest. That's how I felt. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my mind. I did all of these meetings and concerts and this conference call. I couldn't remember anything. And our memories are very precious, right? Our memories shape our growth and our future, and also our how we see ourselves. And if I can't remember a darn thing and I'm just doing all of this stuff, then I'm like, what's the point? So I knew I had to do something that helped me heal. And when we really try to be in the moment with the music and the ragas, that's how I ended up writing the evening Book of Ragas and morning Book of Ragas volume 2. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Now, what's also amazing was I noticed that there was another element or genre that you infused, which is Sufism, Sufi, right?
Yes, Sufi music, yes. And that was something that happened because I met a wonderful Sufi singer. We both started jamming, and Sufi music is very mystical and meditative, and there's a lot of sometimes Sufi concert can go on for hours. I met the singer, and she was like, "You should just, we should try to jam together." The result was so beautiful, was so beautiful, and it feels like you're transported in another world. Yeah, so that's how I ended up blending Sufi music, and which is, in the tracks, it was a vocalist, the vocalist on the Book of Ragas Volume 1, Book of Ragas Volume 2, different, but they're both rooted in Sufi traditions. Yeah.
Wow. It's what a nice blend, and I've listened to both volume 1 and 2 over and over
Oh, wow.
for the last few weeks or so. Yeah, I love Sufi music. And then both vocalists, they're beautiful. They're both.
Yeah.
So then after that, you have this raga and waltzes.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about the backstory of this album?
Absolutely. And there is a very big backstory. So my dad died 3 years ago when I composed Ragas and Waltzes. He was the guiding source for me in my life for music. He, was the CEO of a record label, and I first actually started my music lessons in Africa, where he was the CEO of a record label when I was 5 years old. So I was born in India. Then we went to Africa when he was the CEO of a record label. So he would come home and bring so much vinyl. So at the end of the day, we would listen to, on this beautiful vinyl turntable, all genres, pop, classical, jazz, you name it. He would have hundreds and hundreds of records. And in the house that we had in Africa, in Nigeria, I had a piano. That's how I started playing. And my mom said, okay, she was like, I was like a freak. I was just playing. Everyone told me to stop practicing. It was the other problem I had. I could not explain it. My mother just said, we're just born to play this. This is the thing. I don't know how to explain it. So she said, okay, we'll find you a piano teacher. So they put me, and so my dad gave me piano lessons. He bought me my first metronome from Vienna. Then when we moved back to India, he gave me, Indian classical musical lessons. He bought me my first Bach book, The Well-Tempered Clavier, my first Beethoven books. I still have them. Every single possible piece of music that I wanted to buy to learn, he bought them for me. So when he died 3 years ago, my world fell apart. But the one tradition that we had, he was the reason I know the ragas. I would get out of bed and he would be playing a morning raga, and he would be like, Charu, don't you think this is a beautiful day? Listen to this morning raga. Aren't you at an amazing piece? And I'm like, Dad, stop bothering me. I have homework. And, I would do the typical young kid things like, why are you bothering me with ragas? But it was always playing in our house because he was such a fan. But he was also a big fan of Western classical music. He's such a progressive mind. So his way of thinking, inevitably, gave me my way of thinking. And every year, New Year's Eve, our tradition was to listen to the Vienna Philharmonic, play the New Year concert. That was our tradition. No matter what happened, where we were in the world, whether in person, he would open a glass of champagne. We would sit down and listen to Strauss and listen to Radetzky March and listen to the Trish Trash polka, everything. That was our tradition, our way of welcoming the new year. It was such joy. It was such energy. The Vienna Philharmonic is one of the greatest orchestras in the world. And I had such a passion for waltzes and such a passion for dancing after all of these formative years listening to the Vienna Philharmonic. So, Ragas and Waltzes is a tribute to my dad. That he gave, literally, the title says it all. He gave me ragas in my life. He also gave me waltzes. So in that album, I also have all of the songs dedicated to my dad. In fact, and most people do not believe this, the Waltz for My Father, I wrote it, which is probably my most downloaded track, the day after he died. The whole thing, I wrote it the day after he died. And the whole album, I wrote it in 2 weeks after he died. The entire album. It just came out. So Vienna Waltz. So that's the Vienna Waltz, and then the Waltz for My Father, and then there are two raga pieces based on Raga Kalyani and Hemant. And the whole album is a dedication to my dad, and I just wrote it. I was very, very grief stricken. I didn't know what was going on. I just, like many composers, channeling my emotions, and that's how that album was born.
Oh, wow. Now then, the latest would be the 2023 album, Rags and Ragas,
Yes,
right? And then, so I see a lot of big name
big
jazz
names.
musicians.
That was when I really grew up. The Raga Jazz really grew up. I mean, we charted #1 in India, #3 in the United States, #2 in Kenya, #6 in Turkey. We got features in Rolling Stone. I made iTunes #1 in India, not only in jazz, but all genres. It was the #1 album in all genres. And I had people, with Steve Gadd and John Patitucci and James Lasty, it was like a Grammy contender. And I had people just emailing me saying, what is this? Like, this is crazy. Like, what is this? And I used all different ragas. I used Charukesi for the first time. Raga Hemant had done before, Raga Kalyani, and then Raga #1, which is Kirwani Bhimpalasi. And I used all, Bhagashree Raga for the last track. That's the evening raga. It's supposed to be played from 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. It's a pentatonic scale, but what I found was it's so interesting. When you do it in jazz, I dovetailed it with Miles Davis's So What chord. With it. That was when I started to get more and more playful with the ragas and expand the musical possibilities and have fun with it. And it's a light-hearted way of bringing Raga Bhagashree to the audiences. And because normally you wouldn't have ever really thought that was a Raga Bhagashree,
Right. Wow. But you just played as something so special, and wow. Then didn't you bring back the piece from the Book of Ragas into this?
I did.
Right?
Yes. Raga Hemant became Bourbon Street Stroll. That was the title track with Steve Gadd playing. That was very special. I also brought back Raga #1. It's interesting because this scale in Indian music is called Raga Kirwani. It's the overlap of the harmonic minor, and it's an evening raga. There's a little bit of Bhimpalas in the which is the flattened second, and it's got a lot of energy. So this raga #1 became sort of like my signature piece. And a lot of people, like that. So Kirwani really has never really, been jazzified like this. etc., etc. And that was also there in the album. But my intention was to really show people how ragas can be super fun, and I had a lot of people emailing me saying, we've had a very stodgy way of looking at ragas, like they're so old school, we had to learn them, and now this is a fun way of listening to ragas. So that was like, I think my pinnacle of my raga jazz style is the rags and ragas.
Especially, bringing those, first pieces back to this latest 2020 album. How do you think your sound has evolved, or your creation has evolved?
First of all, it became much more jazzy, and I think you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell with the grooves, you can tell with the beat, you can tell with some of the chord choices. They're much more jazzy. So someone, who probably listened to my first album and like singing, this is not jazz. I don't know what the heck is it. In this album, they were like, okay, that's jazz. So that again, it's an evolution. It's a learning, it's a growth for me as to how to think about jazz, because it's an amazing genre, and it's so deep and so layered. So when you want to take two crazy deep genres like raga music and jazz, you've got to really pay your dues to both. So I think the first thing I would say, it started to sound more like the sound that I wanted, which is Raga Jazz. And then I also think, given the caliber of the solos, it started to be more virtuosic, like I love Oscar Peterson, I love Bill Evans, and I love David Brubeck, and I've been listening to these cats as everybody, for the so many decades, and I wanted to do something like that, but in using the ragas. And I think that album comes close to what I was hoping for when I first started this journey.
Oh, wow. That's impressive, though, because I really thought you were a jazz pianist.
Everyone did. Everybody did. I have to say
God.
that was like a huge learning. I know, and I'm still learning. I believe in or not, I take weekly lessons with a jazz teacher. So we go over. I can't tell you how many hundreds of hours I've put into learning and just perfecting and learning and perfecting, because our work is never really done, right? Our work is never really done in order to honor these two traditions. We learn everything from the modes to extensions to substitutions to modulations to and runs and all of that stuff, and stuff that I never learned growing up, and how I can translate that into ragas. Like, how can a run be a raga? How can you do a run with a raga as opposed to, a 12-tone scale? But very different. I mean, it's using the same technique, but very different. And so I want to be true to what I'm creating and honor both of these genres. And you have to honor it by putting in the work and understanding your past in order to create, this.
Right. Well, because I'm a classical musician too, and I sort of fooled around the idea of learning jazz around pandemic, but miserably failed. And
It's hard, huh?
it's so
It's
hard.
It is really hard. Yeah.
Because no matter how I try to, improvisation is, I can do a simple improvisation, no problem. I can play by ear, but everything sounds so classical to me, because that's how I learn music.
And that's the thing. Once you start in the classical tradition, everything sounds classical to you.
Right.
And I just had to learn it's such a different way of thinking about harmonies. It's a different way of thinking about modulations. Like, if you were doing a classical piece, a jazz piece could be. And if you would arrive at a totally different point than where Mozart arrived at. And so I would take my well, and to do this, I would take my well honed, tried and true um, classical pieces, kind of like what John Batiste is doing now with his, amazing albums, blending styles, and just, give it a fresh life and a different way, just for exercises. And that's how my whole jazz learning went into classical. My jazz learning evolved from classical, rather.
Right. But also, you mentioned about your father who would bring you so many different uh, albums to home, right? Whether you lived in different countries,
Exactly.
and so you grew up listening to these music, including jazz, and I can tell. I think there was, although you were strictly, your foundation was classical, but being exposed to so many different genres of music, growing up and constantly listening to these music in the background, even including in Indian music, I think they are really finally sort of coming together.
I think that they're all there. Everything that you listen to, and I tell this to my students, is there in your subconscious. And it's there whether you decide you want them to be there or not, they're there. And what ends up happening is they end up influencing you in different things that happen.
Yeah. But tell me about a little bit more your upbringing. It's so interesting. So you were born in India, but quickly you moved to Africa.
Yes. So I was born in India in a beautiful town called Madurai, which is the city of temples and poets. It's a truly stunning city. Lots of famous poets and artists and Indian musicians were born there. So it is sort of like a city that was meant for artists. It's a city not a lot of people go to. It's in South India, but it's so beautiful. I lived there my earliest childhood years, and then in South India, and then my father got a job in Nigeria, so the whole family, my sister was very young at a time, and I went to Africa, in Nigeria, and there I went to a local school, and I started playing the piano, and my mom got me a fantastic teacher, and I started playing from the age of 5, and at 6 I was doing all of these playing Bach and playing some of the more complicated pieces. And then we decided to leave the country because it was getting politically and economically very unstable. So we left because there was a coup, there was some anarchy. So we left from Nigeria back to India. And when we went back to India, I ended up living in this major city called Chennai, or Madras, which a lot of people used to know it as. It's now officially called Chennai. Millions of people. It's a much bigger city than where I was born. And we hunted high and low for a fantastic piano teacher, like the best of the best. And we were very lucky to find an incredible piano teacher. And I don't know how this happened, but she was a person, her name is Geeta Manan. She passed away a few years ago. She would live in this big house, many grand pianos. She had, I think, 3 grand pianos and uprights, and she had probably every piece of musical piano literature ever written in there. And she had so many students. That's how my love for teaching was born. And she was such a disciplinarian. Oh my God. I Students were not allowed to come to class if they did not practice. They were sent home.
Wow.
I know. I mean, I still welcome my students if they haven't practiced in class, but my sister got sent home many times. She's an amazing pianist and vocalist in her own way.
Really?
Yeah, but she didn't have the piano drive like I did. And we were always, I was taught uh, really to push myself, and at the age of 9 I was sight reading, transposing, orchestrating, you name it. I could read full scores when I was 9, very crazy. Yeah, I had perfect pitch. So we had exercises where she would play something and we would have to write it in alto clef, tenor clef, everything. I know it's quite I know it's an amazing training, you know. And and when I went to orchestras, I would take my scores with me, so I would be reading all of the musical parts from flute to woodwind, everything, and following along. It's something a training that she gave me, so it was very solid, very solid. So reading and writing music became as natural to me as speaking English, and so that was a large part because of what she gave me in the training when I was 9 years old. And then I started performing concerts everywhere and winning lots of competitions and international piano competitions. And then I said I sort of outgrew the landscape in Madras. And I told my parents, I should apply to college in the United States. So I got into Princeton. I came to Princeton for my undergraduate degree in the United States. So that was my childhood to my teenage years.
Wow. Since then, you've lived in United States?
Yes.
Yeah.
Since then, I've lived in the United States. I went to master's degree in Manhattan School of Music, where I met my husband, and he's also a musician. He plays the trombone. We're both classically trained. And my jazz story just 5 years ago. But since then, I just made I composed and I did a lot of I would say safe composing, traditional, beautiful, nice pieces. I've always been composing since I was a child. But when I say safe composing, I say within the universe that I was taught, within the parameters of what you're taught, which is, the universe of the 12 major minor scales, etc. I never challenge or push myself into doing something really groundbreaking or different. But I knew I always wanted to, because I wanted to find my own voice. And one of the things that I loved about the composers that I think we greatly admire is, when we play Beethoven Sonata or when we play a Rachmaninoff, concerto or Debussy preludes, we are drawn into a world that is uniquely the composer's world. And there can be no question about that. When you play Beethoven, you're like, that's Beethoven. There can be no other way around it. And Debussy was one of my great loves, and I played a lot of his work when I was a child. Who doesn't love this? All of the arabesques and everything which I had in my fingertips also still influence my work today. But the most amazing thing I discovered when I was playing all of these composers were those composers were uniquely their own. Like really and truly, Scriabin was Scriabin, Debussy was Debussy, Rachmaninoff, and they really, really put their stamp and expanded the genre. That takes a lot of time. That takes so much time to come to a point as a composer where you are trying to do your own thing and uniquely your own thing. So I had to actually step away from music, and I became a journalist and I wrote pieces. I traveled the world. I didn't force anything. Yeah, in my other life, I'm a journalist.
I
I
see.
freelanced many years for the New York Times, writing.
Really?
Yeah, writing travel stories. I've won awards for that too. Sort of been on.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's sort of been on the back burner now because my music has taken over its own life. But one of the things I wanted to do is I knew I didn't want to sound like everybody else. That was something that was I was very stubborn about it, actually. I was very adamant about it. I was like, people would be like, oh, that's a nice piece. I'm like, yeah, but sounds like everything else. So, and then I was a little, you can't force or rush creativity. The time comes when it comes, otherwise you end up rehashing things that have already been written and composed, and it sounds pretty, but it's not really your own. So I had to really take a step back and repurpose process, refine, and do it for myself, for nobody else. You know, that's the thing, is like when you have deadlines and we have things like we had to do, it sounds like you're forcing and trying to pander to what the society expects you to create. And that was very frustrating to me. Innately, that was super frustrating to me. I'm like, I don't want to write yet another, sonata that sounds like it's been written before. What's the point? It's already been done. So that process I could not rush. It was, it was supposed to come when it came. So I think the turning point, as I had mentioned, was when I went to New Orleans. It just literally, there was a light bulb that just switched in my head, and I'm like, this is it. I know what I have to do now. It's so crazy. I went to New Orleans as actually on a reporting assignment for journalism, and then I went to a Preservation Hall concert, and I'm like, okay, this is all coming together now. Now I finally understand what I have to do.
You were fortunate that you had this teacher where the music was taught, not just piano, right?
Exactly, the music.
Music
Yes.
is so important. Anyway, so then, after all these years and decades of training and experiences, and then you thought you left music for a while being a journalist, and then
Right.
all these things just come together.
And everything just comes together.
Oh, wow.
You can't just throw away those years of practice and virtuosic training and everything. You just can't. It's just there.
This is something that a lot of young musicians should hear this, because they are all stuck in the practice room and hoping one of these days they have the shot. But I think the life experience is equally important.
Equally important, because I don't want to hear yet another lackluster interpretation of Beethoven's Tempest Sonata. We have enough of that, unless, with the concert scene the way it is, unless you're concertizing from the age of 5 or 6, like, Kissin or Yu Wang, and playing that repertoire, it's very hard to have that as a career, and sustain it, because it's everyone knows the repertoire, everyone plays this repertoire, and so I played this repertoire, but I didn't want to go that path. I didn't want to go the path where I was just playing, the same repertoire. I wanted to create my repertoire. But that was a journey unique to me. Like, everybody has to find what it is that they want to do with their pianistic and compositional career. And so this was what was right for me.
When you start doing something different, was there, I wouldn't say backlash, but because usually when someone like you who are a groundbreaker, trailblazers, usually some people feel a little threatened because
I got so much pushback.
Yeah.
Pushback, I think, is the word you're looking for. I got tons of don't bother, this is not jazz, we're a jazz club, we don't know what you're doing. I mean, it was very, very much, it was hard to break through. And then I started playing, in venues like Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center, and they're like, okay, people started saying, okay, maybe her music is good. And then they came and listened. They were like, this is incredible. And then I had New Jersey Symphony play my work last year. And we had a sold out concert in this thing called Hooray for Bollywood, and that was incredible. And now I'm trying to get my work into more orchestral, into orchestras to try to tell them about the beauty of the ragas and how it can really enhance their orchestral work. And string quartets played my works, trios played my work, and now I'm trying to come up with a book of like raga piano pieces and publish them so that pianists can start playing them. So I think that it was the product of a lot of perseverance, a lot of, um, convincing, and to show people, like when I would, play this concert, I would teach people about the ragas and they loved it. I had a lot of audiences come up to me and saying, this is just so beautiful. Play it again, play it again. We want to hear this. We want to play it. We want to get the sheet music. So then I started, appearing in like bigger jazz clubs, and people just started really loving it. And then, obviously I concurrently did the recordings, and released them so people could really understand what I was doing and the style I was doing them in. And then that got us more gigs and more audiences, and et cetera, et cetera. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of convincing people, yes, this is something different. Yes, it's really worth listening to, because I don't think anybody really here is doing anything like this. So I feel like my anyone who does anything different or wants to do something to expand or contribute to the genre is going to have they're going to have people who are going to be like, what is this? I want something like that sounds like Ella Fitzgerald, you know. And the truth of the matter is, like, when even Ella was doing her thing or Nat King Cole was doing his thing, he had a ton of backlash and a ton of, pushback, and getting anything off the ground that's different or changing the norm is never easy. And right now we listen to Beethoven and Mozart and Tchaikovsky, even Nutcracker. Like, everyone listens to Nutcracker. Nobody realizes the Nutcracker was a colossal failure when it was debuted. Colossal. Like, nobody wanted to hear it. It was not until a ballet company came and put the Nutcracker to their ballet that it started to become a beloved tradition. People don't hear those stories. They just say, Nutcrackers, they're everywhere. So I think, it's tough in the beginning. I'm very passionate about this, obviously, as you can tell, given like I'm putting every single, waking minute and energy into creation of this, not only because I believe in it, because I think it's a beautiful sound, but I also think that it is expanding the jazz palette and the musical palette in a good way. It gives people options when they want to improvise. They don't have to improvise necessarily linearly or on a pentatonic scale. They can improvise over a raga. They can do runs on a raga. Like, this is just extending the scope of musicality and sonicness, and that's one of the reasons why I'm like passionate about this. So, but it's taken some time, but I think it's getting there.
Wow,
Lots of
but it takes
lots. Yeah.
courage, to do.
Yeah, I'm
And
not gonna lie. It's not been,
wow,
bed of roses. Especially as a woman in jazz field, and especially from India doing this, everyone wants you to be like a doctor or a lawyer, or get a job in a corporate office with beautiful views of the city. And here I am composing and taking my work on the road. But it is right for me, because I had a corporate job before, and I all of them, and I was like, what am I doing here? I just don't belong here. Yeah, even before as a journalist, I believe it or not, I worked at Wall Street for a bit as a banker. Yeah, so I've done it all, and
oh
I
my
really try
goodness.
to show some integrity, to be true to myself. It's been hard, but I think that most people, they're just they go through the routine and go through the motions and go through the jobs that they don't like, in order to get a paycheck, have a roof, a family. And I'm very grateful I have all of those things. I have an amazing family, I have a roof over my head, but creatively I was not at a good place. I didn't want to be just like every other composer ever lived. And that was not sitting well with me. It was a very stubborn internal wrestle that I had with me. And I wanted to bring my identity to the table. And that's how I had to I had to go through life, to the school of hard knocks, as they say. The school of really hard knocks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what would you give to those, fellow artists or aspiring artists who are yet to discover themselves? And, it's just maybe they just graduated from school and they're starting their career and beginning to really, that's when you actually, get to know yourself, starting to get to know yourself, right? So, is there.
I would say that, it sounds really hard, and it is actually hard to do in practice, but you don't have to be all things to all people. That's rule number one. I think that's very hard because we have a certain expectation as a society. A musician will play on the concert stage and they will do this and they will practice this and this is your repertoire and that is the way to do things. It works for some people and it doesn't work for others. I think it's important to find out who you are so that you don't have to be all things to all people, because honestly, if you yourself are not convinced of your own path and your journey, you cannot convince others. It just is not going to work. You have to be very rock solid and convinced this is your calling and this is your passion. And I would, play these beautiful pieces. And at the end of the day, I would always come home thinking, I can do something different. I can do something else. And, I love playing the piano. I would never change anything about my journey. This is who I am. This is my office. This is where I live and breathe. And so for many pianists and musicians, this is their office. If they're behind an instrument, that's their office. But they're not necessarily sure if they have to be playing Mozart or they have to be playing Haydn or they have to be playing a concerto. And I'm just saying, find what you cannot live without. You cannot live without something means it has to be part of you. I actually love creating this. I love bringing this sound. It's something I can't live without, the part of creation and blending and bringing in ragas. Find what's something you cannot live without. And if you cannot live without it, then you were probably born to do that.
Being a female, especially from South Asian, with a South Asian representation, it's still, the industry is male dominated field. Yeah. So have we seen any progress in terms of representation opportunities?
I think people are starting to embrace women a lot more. Like, especially when I travel and tour in India, I'm always blown away by the comments I get from women, especially Indian women who never really done jazz or know jazz or tried to do jazz. They're like, this is so inspiring. It's new to me. It's amazing. And I gave a master class when I was recently played at the Royal Opera House in Mumbai, my second time playing there, which is amazing. And I gave a master class at Whistling Woods, which is the largest film school in Asia and also the largest Bollywood film school in Mumbai. And I gave a master class to a ton of students and I explained Raga Jazz, how to improvise. The students were just like so, mesmerized. And being a woman and doing all of that, getting the band together, getting the acts, traveling by myself, playing a show, composing every scrap of the music, arranging, orchestrating, it's not easy. It's really hard. It's just very hard. Because, we don't do covers, we do originals. These are all my pieces. So first of all, it's the composing and getting the music done and recording. And second of all, it's booking shows and taking it out. I mean, it's a lot of work. So, but the amazing thing is, we need role models, we need mentors, because honestly, the glass ceiling has to be broken. We cannot continue in a space where there are no female jazz musicians, especially coming from India or Asia. We have to be the change. We have to absolutely show that it can be done. and you can actually do it. So that way, people are inspired and they don't feel that it's absolutely impossible to do. And the second thing is, collaborators and musicians are everywhere, and so many musicians want to work with me, and I collaborated with a lot of amazing local musicians, and I love playing with them, and I love collaborating with them. I love sharing my music with them. I'm going to be playing in Miami in like a couple of weeks. I love playing with the local jazz scene there, and so they get to know my work, and they get to do this. um they've been great. They've been great, very respectful, amazing. I have had nothing but amazing experiences with jazz musicians in India, the local talent there. I went to England and I played with my dear friend Wendy Kirkland, had great experiences there. I recently played in Italy, in Turin. We had a sold out show, festival, hundreds of people outdoors in Turin. Showcased Raga Jazz there with my dear friend there. I super, super responsive to my music, and my audience has been amazing. It really has been amazing. And I think that taking the courage to do it is the first step.
Our conversation is going, almost ending, and it just time flies so fast. But maybe just one or two more. So, if there's one thing you hope your listeners to take away from your music, what would it be?
Just appreciate how beautiful the ragas are, how we can actually create harmony between cultures and borders, how there are possibilities, and really how we shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves and our thinking in a certain way, because there's so much beauty, so much richness, so much we can learn from each other, from different cultures, from different countries and different traditions. If we can just open our minds and listen and appreciate and collaborate and come together, that's what I really would love.
And then, what legacy do you hope to leave in jazz and the global music landscape?
I really would like Raga Jazz to be a thing, more mainstream. I would like people like how, we listen to country and pop and rock and roll and all of that stuff, which was created. I mean, it wasn't something that just, existed, created it. I would like that to be more, well known. We had lots of great styles in jazz. We had the Dixie style, the stride, and then we had, American Songbook, which everybody has to do, and then bossa nova, and then bebop and hard bop and all of that. So I guess I want this to be like, an innovation and a contribution.
It is already an innovation. So congratulations. And I think there's more, I'm sure, albums and books to come.
Definitely. Yes, I'm working on my first new age album, ambient album, all using Indian ragas. It's not jazz, but it still uses ragas. We are debuting it in Carnegie Hall July 25th. Yeah, it's all healing evening ragas, using some ragas that I haven't used before, like Raga Desh. And it's a new age album, and it's simpler for people to play and learn, and it'll be the first time I think I've written a hymn based on a raga. It actually sounds like a hymn, like a spiritual hymn, but it's all using ragas. Yeah, I call it Mohanam hymn. And my friend heard it and they're like, "Oh, this is like the Amazing Grace, but raga version." And I said, "Yeah." So it's a simpler way to learn the ragas. It's not jazzy, it's not crazy, crazy virtuosic. But in a way, once I transcribe it and for people to download and play, they can actually play a simple song like on a raga after that.
So we'll keep speaking of, so I'm sure you have more events to come. So now it's time to promote your current and upcoming projects. The floor is yours. So please take it away.
Oh, thank you. I've had a great time touring India. I will be back in India this summer, playing at a big, big auditorium. We're working on the Ambani Center, which is a big, big auditorium. It's like the Kennedy Center in India. In a couple of weeks, I'll be playing Miami. I'll be playing the Loomis Park Festival on March 16th outdoors with some fantastic jazz musicians in Miami. on the bass and the drums. And then I'll be in the Hudson Valley March 22nd, playing at Back Bar, which is this venue that is in the Hudson Valley Poughkeepsie area. And then I'll be at Carnegie Hall for my 5th appearance in July 25th, debuting my new album, playing with some legends in the music scene, including Premick Russell Tubbs, who's a flute player who was one of the original members of John McLaughlin's Mahavishnu Orchestra. So he's a big fan, and he's able to straddle, the ragas and the jazz, because that's something what he was doing with John McLaughlin's band early on. And then I'll be touring Spain. We're getting the exact dates, and be back in London. So my calendar, I have all my dates on my calendar for people to get bookings and shows on charusuri.com. And yeah, we're planning to play in many more jazz clubs in the country and also abroad. Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. And you mentioned there's a new album coming, or?
Yes. So I'm working. I'm not touring as much this year because I am focusing on recording and releasing my album Nidra, which in Sanskrit means sleep. It's all using very calming evening ragas, because we are right now going through a very big stress in turmoil. Everybody is going through some very exceptional stress, given the events, the landscape, personal troubles, and all of that stuff. And the album was born because a lot of my friends and even myself had difficulty sleeping, and I don't want people to resort to taking a pill to go to sleep. I just think that if we can find natural ways, listening to music, of very healing music, and having a good night's rest, that would be the best thing for our health. So all of the album ragas are supposed to be played right after sunset in the evening. And that's how the ancient culture, they've been doing it for years. So I've composed music using these ragas, and we have a phenomenal talent pool of musicians on that album that will be coming out in July. Yeah.
I can't. Well, I may be able to attend your Carnegie
Please.
concert, so I would love that in July. Yeah. So before I let you go, I didn't tell you, but we have this rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yes. So yeah, just to end our conversation in a little bit more faster pace and a fun way. So I will ask some silly questions, but here's a little twist. As silly as these questions may sound, your answers may reveal who you truly are.
Okay.
So ready or not, let's do it. So question number 1, what is your comfort food?
An Indian thali. It's a silver platter full of many different curries, rice, Indian bread, and like stews. And it's something that I always go to after a hard tour or recording session. I go get that.
Oh, yes, that sounds so amazing. How do you like your coffee in the morning?
Steamed oat milk, espresso, and that's it, no sugar. So oat milk latte.
Cats or dogs?
A dog person, but now I've had to adjust to cats because my daughter's a cat person.
Okay. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset. I'm a night owl.
Summer or winter?
Definitely summer. I was born in India.
Now, level 2. What skill have you always wanted to learn but haven't had a chance to?
I would say cooking properly. I dabble in cooking and make some dishes, but by my mom's standards, you are a disastrous cook.
Oh, always mom.
Always.
Yes. What is your word or words to live by?
Authenticity, integrity.
What is the most important quality you look for in other people?
Kindness and integrity.
Name 3 people who inspire you, living or dead. I know this is really difficult, but
Miles Davis, huge influence. Oscar Peterson, huge influence. And Debussy, actually. Debussy been my reason why I think I went into jazz, because I think he was really the first classical jazz composer.
Good point. You're right. Yeah. Name 1 piece in your current playlist.
I would say Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. It's very modal, it's gentle, it's very much the style of what I'm doing.
Last question. Fill in the blank. Music is blank.
Life.
Ah, yes. So that wraps up this episode of The Piano Pod. A heartfelt thanks to you, Charu, for joining us today and sharing your incredible stories and insights and expertise with such authenticity and joy. So to our wonderful audience, you can learn more about Charu and her work by visiting her website at charusuri.com and start listening to her wonderful Raga Jazz music on all streaming services. And of course, thank you to faithful fans and listeners for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the Piano Pod on YouTube. And please don't forget to share and review this episode on your social media and tag the Piano Pod. It's one of the best ways to help us grow, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So for the latest piano news and updates, be sure to follow the Piano Pod on Substack, TikTok, and LinkedIn. I will see you for the next episode of the Piano Pod. Bye, everyone, and thank you, Charu, once again.
It's an honor. Thank you so much for hearing my story. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.